Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Jordan Ellis. I am 35 years old, and I need to get this off my chest while it's still fresh. What began as a throwaway remark from my now former fiancée turned into a full-scale unveiling of character, pedigree, and pride. It made me reconsider what I value, who I stand beside, and the kind of respect that should be non-negotiable in a partnership. For context, I'm a diesel mechanic. I like the work, and I am good at it. It is honest, technical, and requires judgment you cannot fake. Tolerances by feel, the grunt and pitch of a working engine, the patience to trace a problem from a bad sensor to a tangled line of aftertreatment. I make solid money. I own my house, paid off years ago after I inherited it from my grandmother. I tend to keep my private life private. That privacy would become the hinge on which everything swung. My fiancée, now ex, was named Brianna Porter. She is 29. She works in pharmaceutical sales and does well enough. About 2 months ago, she was over the moon because she was accepted into a very exclusive country club in Greenville, South Carolina, courtesy of her regional director's sponsorship. The initiation fee alone was $50,000, with $1,200 a month in dues. I congratulated her. I do not begrudge anyone a place where they feel they belong. Once she got in, my weekends changed without me changing anything at all. Her Saturdays became tennis with the ladies, then champagne on the terrace, then a charity luncheon that rolled into a wine tasting. Sundays were networking brunches, under gas heat lamps and monogrammed umbrellas. That was fine by me. When Brianna was out, I was in the garage with my 1967 Camaro project, or sitting on the end of a quiet dock with a line in the water. This is not a story about me bemoaning anyone's social calendar. The Fishers began with a single conversation on a Tuesday evening when she was getting ready for a club gala. I was under the hood of the Camaro, elbow deep in fuel lines, hearing her closet door slide and click and the muted pop of a perfume bottle. She stepped into the garage to tell me not to wait up. She would be home around 11. I asked, not for the first time, when I would get to meet the friend she had been talking about nonstop. She paused, compact in hand, and said we needed to talk. That phrase is gravity. I set down the wrench and leaned on the fender. She said these people were different. Refined was the word. They discussed investments and art collections. She said they would not discuss carburetors and fishing spots. She said I would feel uncomfortable. She added, after one of those careful, surgical pauses, that I would embarrass her. The way I talk, the job I do, the hobbies I enjoy, too blue-collar for that environment. I could have retorted in 100 quick ways. Instead, I just looked at her. The ring I bought on her left hand, the keys to my house on the hook by the door, the camo hat I kept on the workbench, the life we had been building under one roof for 3 years, engaged for 6 months. I did not raise my voice. I said, understood. She tried to smooth it over. I said it again, because I understood perfectly. She left for the gala with the swish of an expensive dress, and after her taillights disappeared down the street, I went inside, washed the grease from my hands, and made a phone call I had avoided for 2 years. The call was to my older sister, Celeste, who runs the business my father left us, the very country club Brianna had just joined. That was something I had never told Brianna, not because I wanted to test her, but because my relationship with that place, and with our father, was complicated. My father built Greenville Pines Club in 1987, starting with 9 holes, a cinderblock clubhouse, and too much stubbornness to count. By the time he died 5 years ago, it was a full-scale operation. 2 18-hole courses, a dozen tennis courts, a pool complex, a spa, private dining rooms, and a long waiting list. He left the controlling interest split between me, my sister, and a family trust. Celeste took the helm. I became the silent partner who signed things annually and let the dividend checks go straight to charities and savings. I did not tell Brianna because my father and I barely spoke for the last decade of his life. He thought I should trade coveralls for cufflinks. He thought wrenches were beneath the name he had polished into the plaques on the clubhouse wall. We were civil but distant. After he passed, Celeste and I forged a workable truce with the club. She would run it. I would not pretend to run it. I would be there when the family needed me. That was the full extent of my involvement. On that Tuesday night, however, I called Celeste and said I needed to make an appearance at the Children's Hospital fundraiser that Saturday. She was surprised. I had not set foot on the property since our father's funeral. She did not ask me to justify for long. She knew about Brianna's membership. She said she would speak with the general manager and the staff, so no one was confused about who I was. I told her to make it formal. Full treatment. Saturday evening, Brianna left early to set up for the auction. She looked exhilarated, important, like a hostess gliding toward her big moment. I put on a navy suit that had not seen daylight in a while, shined my boots, and drove my 2003 Ford F-250, the same one Brianna constantly suggested I should not park in the driveway because the neighbors would talk. The truck idled like a contented bear. It was, and is, mine. The entrance lights at Greenville Pines glow a pale butter yellow from hammered bronze sconces. The stone driveway loosens the shoulders as it curves. A valet saw my truck and jogged to the door with an energy I rarely see outside a winning locker room. "Good evening, Mr. Ellis," he said, breathless. Inside, Leonard Price, the general manager who had been at the club since my father hired him, met me with a precise smile that did not quite hide his relief. Leonard thanked me for coming. "Your sister mentioned you might attend," he said. "The Lafayette Ballroom has been prepared for the auction since 4 o'clock. I told him I knew the way. The staff flanked the walkway as I crossed the lobby, a silent corridor of crisp uniforms and lowered voices. There is a smell to old wood and polished brass that calls up memories whether you want them or not. I remember being small enough to look up at the underside of a banister and think it was a cathedral. The ballroom hummed with money. 200 people and not a raised voice. Brianna was near the bar in a sleek emerald dress, laughing with a group of women whose first names I had heard and whose husbands' surnames were on plaques. I recognized her boss, Denise Parker, from the pharmaceutical company. I was almost to them when I heard a baritone voice I would identify in a thunderstorm. "Jordan Ellis. Is that really you?" It was Harold Benton, the board president, who had been my father's closest friend and remained like an uncle to my sister and me. He swept me into a hug that probably scandalized the room, announced my name, and brought every head in a 30-foot radius to attention. People do not whisper with my surname in that building. They weigh it. Harold introduced me to half the room in 15 minutes. He took visible joy in it, like he had been waiting for this reunion for years. "You remember Jordan," he told a pair of board members, Tom's son. He and Celeste own the place now. Each time he said it, I saw confusion flicker through the crowd in ripples, moving toward the bar like a tide. When the wave reached Brianna, it knocked her completely still. Her champagne flute stopped halfway to her lips. Her eyes tracked Harold's hand on my shoulder. Denise looked from me to Brianna and then down to the emerald glass as if it had answers. I walked over, shook Denise's hand, and greeted the others with the kind of small talk you use as a bridge over a canyon. Brianna found her voice. "This is my fiancée," she managed, and then the room went quiet in a way that felt engineered. Harold, bless him, doubled down. "You did not tell me you were engaged," he said to me, delighted. "To one of our newest members, no less. Brianna, you are a fortunate woman. The Elises built this place with their own hands." She muttered something about fresh air and moved toward the terrace with a practiced glide I could not fault. I did not chase her. I had no intention of causing a scene. If a lesson was unfolding, it would not be under my control. I enjoyed the auction. I placed a bid on a week in Aspen, not for the trip, but for the children's hospital that would receive the $20,000. I had conversations that went deeper than brand names. A retired engineer talked to me about gear ratios on an old tractor he was restoring with his grandson, and he fell into a delighted silence when I suggested an off-label part swap that would keep the restoration aesthetically correct without another $3,000 in machine work. Another gentleman with a quiet watch asked about offshore fishing in late spring in the Carolinas. I told him what I knew. We were people. That was all. Meanwhile, my phone lit up repeatedly. "We need to talk now. This is not funny. You lied to me. Jordan, please stop ignoring me." I let the screen dim and kept my focus on the people in front of me. Denise eventually came back around. She said Brianna had described me to her colleagues as working in transportation, vague enough to imply logistics or regional management. Denise was clearly troubled that Brianna had reportedly been using the club as a rhetorical battering ram to force introductions that did not belong to her. I shrugged. "People show you who they are," I said to Denise, when they think they are in rooms where consequences will not reach them. Denise pressed her lips together and nodded once. If I had known she was speaking that way about Tom's son, she said, I would have had a very different conversation with her a long time ago. I did not ask what conversation she had in mind. I had a sense I would learn soon enough. I left the event at 10 o'clock. The valet did not have to sprint that time. My truck sits in a way that calls attention to itself without apologizing. When I got home, Brianna's car was in the driveway. She was pacing in the living room, heels clicking on hardwood, a slow metronome of anger and panic. 3 years, she said, before I could put my keys down. You hid this for 3 years. I told her I had not hidden anything. She had never asked me if I owned Greenville Pines. She had asked an awful lot of questions about watch brands, about the newest renovated suites, about how people like that structure their time. She had never asked about my family. I repeated that I am a mechanic. She said I own a country club. I clarified. I inherited a part of one. My sister runs it. The trust holds a rest. I do not work there. I do not live there. I do not pretend to be someone I am not. Her response made the walls feel closer. Do you have any idea how humiliated I am? She asked. She said she had told people at the club that I would never fit in, that I would embarrass her, and now those people had discovered that I was a landlord to their leisure. She said the club's women had a sharp tongue. She had handed them the knife herself. I let her speak. When she finished, I quietly asked if she heard herself. I said that the only person who thought my job or my hobbies were embarrassing was the person standing in our living room with a perfectly framed hairdo. She tried everything then. Apologies. Tears. Accusations. She said I had set her up to fail. She asked why I had not told her. She said she would not have said those things if she had known. That last statement told me exactly what I needed to know. If respect for me depended on what my last name could unlock, it was not respect. It was leverage. I told her we were not getting married. She could blame me if she wanted, but the truth was simpler. I had finally seen the thing I was trying not to see. She talked about deposits and save the dates and airline tickets for her parents. I told her I would cover the deposits. Her parents could use the tickets for a vacation anywhere in the United States. She crossed her arms and announced she was not returning the ring. I told her to keep it. She hurled it anyway, a glint that skittered across the floor and landed near the baseboard. I picked it up. The room felt like the inside of a church bell about to ring. The next morning was scripture written in calls and texts. 27 missed calls from Brianna, 12 from her mother, Lorraine. Texts that swung between contrition and fury. Midday, Denise called me. She sounded tired but resolute. She wanted me to know Brianna would not be returning to the company. She said the evidence of Brianna leveraging perceived social status to promise introductions had turned into a pattern she could not ignore. She said that, independent of my situation, it was fraud against clients. I told her I understood and did not ask for details. Monday morning, Lorraine arrived at my shop in a white Mercedes, the hood ornament catching the light like a challenge. She made it clear she would prefer to be anywhere else. She said we needed to discuss the situation like adults. I told her I was working and could speak for 5 minutes in the office. She praised my house and my manners in the same breath. She asked me to consider her daughter's reputation. Lorraine said Brianna had made one tiny mistake. She said any woman would be proud to introduce a man with my assets. She slid that word across the desk as if it were a calling card. I asked her if she would have come to speak with me if I'd been only what I say I am, a mechanic with grease under his nails and a mortgage paid by sweat. She told me not to twist her words. She said Brianna deserved a lifestyle befitting her ambition. I told her a lifestyle is something you build, not something your fiancé is supposed to hand you like a party favor. Lorraine attempted a negotiation as if this were a matter of closing terms. She offered a prenuptial agreement as a concession. She promised her daughter would learn to appreciate me. She mentioned couples counseling. I told her this was not a settlement. There is no bargaining with respect. I asked her to leave. She left with a huff and a tracery of perfume that took too long to clear from the office. The games began on Tuesday. Celeste called to say Brianna had attempted to use her membership to book the grand ballroom. When asked what the event was, Brianna told the coordinator she was moving our wedding to the club as a romantic gesture because we had reconciled. We had not, and we would not. Celeste canceled the booking and, with the board's approval, revoked Brianna's membership. She told me the reason, and my hand went cold on the phone. Over the weekend, Brianna had charged $8,000 in champagne and food to a member account by telling accounting it was for an Ellis family celebration and that I had authorized it. She had tried to spend money that was not hers by invoking a name that did not belong to her. If there is a definition of audacity in a dictionary, that anecdote belongs in it. It was not just ugly. It was criminal. Celeste had already set the reversal in motion and alerted security that Brianna was not welcome on the property. On Wednesday, I got a direct message on LinkedIn from a man named Quentin James. He said he had dated Brianna 2 years ago. He said he broke up with her because she found out his father owned commercial real estate and started floating the idea of reconnecting after she had already moved on. When he declined, she suddenly said she might be pregnant. He warned me to be careful. I thanked him and took a screenshot, then forwarded it to a lawyer friend to keep in a folder marked in case. Thursday morning, Celeste called again. "You are not going to believe this," she said. And she was right. Brianna showed up at the club during the ladies' tennis tournament and told the guard she was still my fiancée and had the right to enter. Security stopped her. She argued loudly. Members arriving with rackets and sunglasses began to slow down to watch. Celeste asked me to come. I did. When I approached the gate, Brianna saw me and angled her body toward the crowd, eyes bright with tears that did not reach her voice. "Tell them who I am," she said. I told the guard exactly who she was, a former member whose access had been revoked for cause. She said it was illegal to keep her out. Celeste walked up and explained the sponsorship had been through Denise's corporate account, and since Brianna no longer worked there and had charged thousands of dollars under false pretenses, her membership was terminated. She would receive a full refund of her personal contribution, which amounted to $0. The murmurs from the tennis crowd were not cruel, just shocked. Phones came out. Brianna tried one last maneuver. She said she would sue for discrimination of some sort, and then for emotional distress, and for breach of promise since I had proposed. I said the proposal had effectively been rescinded the night she told me I was too embarrassing to be seen with her friends. Then she pulled the lever Quentin had warned me about. She said she was pregnant. I said, calmly, that she was not. She asked how I could possibly know. The answer was simple. We had not been intimate in 2 months, ever since the club became her primary relationship. I also mentioned that her ex had warned me. It was not my finest rhetorical flourish, but it was, regrettably, relevant. Harold stepped forward in his chairman voice and told her she was trespassing on private property and that the police would be called if she refused to leave. She left with a sentence thrown over her shoulder about regret and reputation. My heart did not speed up. It slowed down to something steady. In the 3 weeks that followed, the consequences unfolded without my hand on the wheel. The scene at the gate was captured from 3 angles and posted on social media with a caption that turned the story into a parable. It spread faster than it should have and farther than I would have liked. Brianna tried to respond with a statement on Instagram accusing me of manipulation and deception, but the claim could not survive the next sentence. She had told people I was too embarrassing for her circle, and then learned the circle existed in my family's shadow. The social consequences in a mid-sized city are not the same as in a small town, but they rhyme. You cannot rebuild your image while insisting the foundation is someone else's fault. Brianna's mother called me one last time and said I needed to make it stop. I told her I was not doing anything. I was staying home, going to work, volunteering at the technical college, and minding my business. The internet, fed by 3 camera angles and a crowd that had seen it in person, did what it does. The professional consequences were immediate. Denise quietly sent a warning to a few people in her industry about the behavior patterns that had surfaced, and pharmaceutical sales is a world small enough for that to matter. Brianna could not find another position. She began posting about entrepreneurship and wellness, selling products with glossy phrases and 1,000 exclamation points. I did not mock it. I did not follow it. I had already seen too much. As for the ring, I did not return it to her. She had thrown it at me. I picked it up and put it in my safe. 1 week later, she sent a message asking if we could meet so she could retrieve personal belongings, and then added a single pointed sentence. I would like my ring back. I did not respond to that line. Instead, I texted her a photo of a labeled box containing the items she had left in the house, cosmetics, a sweater, a pair of running shoes, and told her to pick it up from Celeste's office at the club with security present. She did. The ring remained with me. A friend of mine, Evan, is a jeweler and metalsmith. 2 Saturdays after the incident, I stopped by his shop with the ring. It was pretty, white gold, lab-created diamonds, elegant setting. It had cost me $3,000. In Brianna's mind, it had been a $30,000 piece. The gap said more than any argument could. I asked Evan to hold it for me while I decided whether to sell it, repurpose it, or donate it. I did not want it in the safe anymore. The aftermath rebuilt something else. Celeste and I had dinner every week for a month. We talked about our father in a way we had not been able to while he was alive. What he had done right, what he had done wrong, and how legacy is not the same thing as inheritance. She invited me to consult on a vocational training initiative the club's foundation was launching with a local technical college. Scholarships for welding, heavy mechanics, HVAC, electrical, and plumbing apprenticeships. I said yes, with the caveat that my involvement would be practical, not performative. That is how I met Raven Holt, a welding instructor with a grin like a challenge and a laugh that can roll a bad day off your shoulders. I had seen her on campus before, corralling a group of first-year students with generosity and precision. We met properly when I gave a guest talk about diesel diagnostics. She stayed afterward to ask about the balancing act of art and accuracy in mechanical work. She did not ask about the club. She did not ask about my last name. She asked about the way engines feel when they are right. Our first date was a burger and a local beer at a place in town where you can hear yourself talk. She showed me photos of the 1978 Bronco she was restoring. Chassis lifted, body off, weeks of work in, and a stubborn streak of rust under the driver's door that she refused to ignore. On the third date, I told her the entire story. She laughed so hard she had to set her glass down. So she thought you were not good enough for her rich friends, she said, but you were literally the landlord of their leisure. I corrected her gently, quarter landlord, and she laughed again, the kind that bends a person forward because there is no room for that much delight upright. We have been dating for 2 months now. She does not attach status to heavy doors or to how fast the staff remembers my name. When Celeste had a birthday dinner at the club, Raven came with me in jeans and a white blouse. She shook hands and remembered names. She listened more than she spoke and asked questions that made people blink and reconsider their assumptions. Harold ended the night on the terrace asking Raven about the Bronco like a 12-year-old with a poster on his wall. At one point that night, I stepped away from the table and looked back at the room. My sister's laugh carried across the linen. The board president put his napkin on the table, as if he had placed a stone at the edge of water. Raven leaned into a conversation with Leonard about hiring graduates from the welding program for ongoing maintenance projects. It was not about optics. It was about actual work. For the first time in years, I felt the club as a place where future hands might find a way forward. Brianna had one more attempt in her. She sent a long email about growth and healing, with sentences about therapy and seeing the truth. The last line said she was willing to forgive me for the deception if I was willing to forgive her mistakes. Celeste read it over my shoulder and came up with a phrase that made me laugh harder than I expected. The lion, the witch, and the audacity of this. I archived the message without replying. I have replayed that first conversation in my head, her saying, "You would embarrass me," and me saying "understood" more times than I can count. I unpacked it until the furniture of it sat in different corners. The truth is that the most dangerous part of the whole ordeal was how easy it would have been to ignore that moment. If she had not said it out loud, I might have married a person who saw me as less, and only corrected her vision when she realized the inheritance she stood beside. I do not think Brianna is a villain in the way online stories flatten. She is a person who values a currency I cannot spend. She is a person who mistook credentials for character and thought proximity to a gate would make her a guardian. If she had introduced me to her circle as a mechanic who loved the work and could talk about anything from torque specs to fishing on glassy water at dawn, virtually no one would have cared. Harold knew what I did for a living. Leonard knew. The members who actually build their lives understood respect in ways that do not require a collar to be white. The ring, in the end, became a symbol of a path not taken. I asked Evan to melt the setting down and use the metal for a pair of simple stud earrings that I donated to a foundation gala raffle for the Technical College's Scholarship Fund. The lab stones were set into a pendant that went to a silent auction for a high school machine shop. A young mother who had gone back to school won the pendant and cried when she put it on. I felt a weight lift that I had not realized I was still carrying. At the shop, life returned to things that made sense. We pulled a stubborn diesel from a school bus and coaxed it back to something that sounded like purpose. A contractor brought in an F-350 with a gremlin in the electrical system that did not show up on any scan tool. 3 hours of tracing and one flashlight battery later, we found a chewed line under a plastic tray where a mouse had built a winter house. My mechanic Teddy said, "There is nothing wrong with work you can feel." I agreed with him, and we went to lunch at the diner where they know my coffee order and keep the pot from burning. People at the club behave differently now, but not in the way people think. It is not the deference that matters. It is the attention. They listen when I talk about apprenticeships. They nod when I talk about dignity. Some of them send emails to Celeste asking if the club can sponsor a booth at the technical college's job fair. A few board members walked through the diesel shop last week in Chris shirts that went gray near the tires and asked if there was anything we needed to hire more kids right out of school. I told them we needed kids who showed up on time, who were willing to work toward mastery, and who took pride without swagger. They said they would spread the word. Raven and I took a day trip to Asheville, North Carolina, on a Saturday when clouds hung low like a soft ceiling. We stopped at a salvage yard on the way back to pick through sheet metal, and she ended up haggling with a man over a fender until both of them were laughing. I asked her how she stayed unbothered by all of it. The eyes, the whispers, the stories. She said she built her life out of things that last. Steel, heat, and the way kindness changes a room. Every room you walk into, you bring your weather, she said. I like your weather. In a quieter moment, she asked me if I had forgiven myself for not seeing what I did not want to see in Brianna. I told her forgiveness is a large word. I told her I had learned the most from engine failures that happen slowly. Lack of oil, hairline cracks, little leaks that no one hears until the pressure drops. She said she could work with a man who talks in metaphors that smell like diesel. I told her that was convenient, because I smelled like diesel on most weeknights. A month after the fundraiser, the Children's Hospital sent a letter with a photograph of a new incubator bank that my $20,000 bid had helped fund. Celeste framed the letter and hung it in the corridor of the administrative offices where it would catch the afternoon light. I stood there with her and thought of our father, his impossible standards, and the way we were both slowly forgiving the things he built and the ways he built them. Harold came by my shop one afternoon with 2 coffees and a memory I had not heard. He said my father had stood on the 9th fairway after they had laid sod, hands on his hips, and told the superintendent that someday his son would stand there and understand the labor under the prettiness. Harold said he had not known if my father meant me or the club itself. Turns out he meant both, Harold said. I told him I understood. He clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make the coffee jump. Not everything is tidy. Lorraine still looks at me in the grocery store with a glare like a thrown knife. Brianna still posts about her journey and growth and resilience. People still whisper when I walk through the club lobby sometimes, but the tone has changed. It is not so much gossip as a reminder that the legend of a moment is bigger than the moment itself. I do not feed it. What I do feed are the quiet things. The engine that turns after a patient rebuild. The young woman who wins a scholarship for HVAC because she wrote an essay about keeping her grandmother's house cool in July. The look Raven gives me when I manage to flip a weld bead over a seam exactly level with hers. Those are the currencies that matter to me. They cannot be charged to an account with a last name. They cannot be revoked by a board vote. They require showing up. If you ask me whether I would change anything, I would say no, not because the road was smooth, but because it was honest. Brianna told me who she was. I believe her. I told her who I was, slowly, perhaps too slowly, and I believe myself. When I walk into the club now in jeans and work boots for a charity event or a family dinner, the members who know the story nod at me, as if they have learned something about the cost of assumptions. Maybe they have. Maybe I have, too. Celeste says the club's greatest risk is the story it tells itself about itself. She says it must remain a place where a waiter's son can become a board member without being reminded every 15 minutes of the tray his father carried. I tell her the same truth about my shop. The greatest risk is believing the work is only in the machines. It is not. It is in the people who turn the wrenches and those who respect them. There is a photograph on my mantle now. My grandmother sits at a picnic table in her backyard on a summer afternoon with a paper plate of ribs. laughing so hard her head is thrown back. I am 8 years old in the picture, smudged with barbecue sauce, grinning with missing teeth. The house behind us is the one I own now, the one Brianna used as a stage for another version of herself, and the one Raven quietly inhabits when she falls asleep on my couch after a long day, one hand on her phone, one foot tucked under the other. It is an ordinary house. It is extraordinary to me. A week ago, I got a message from the technical college dean asking if I would deliver the keynote at their trade scholarship banquet. I said yes and sat down that night to write the speech. I wrote about how dignity is not a uniform. It is conduct. I wrote about hands that build and fix, about the civil engineering of a quiet life, about the kinds of wealth you can measure and the kind you cannot. I wrote about respect as a full-time job and about the way failure teaches a person to listen. When I finished, Raven read it and said it sounded like me. I asked her if that was a compliment. She said it was the highest compliment. She kissed my cheek and went back to sketching a weld jig in a notebook. I thought that was the safest place to leave the night. 2 people at a table, building a life out of steady things. Outside, the neighbor's porch light clicked on, as if a stage cue. Somewhere a dog barked once, and then decided whatever it had heard did not require more commentary. People sometimes ask me if I wish I had told Brianna about the club earlier, if secrecy had turned the situation into a test. I will tell you what I tell them. There was no test. There was only timing. Respect would have looked the same whether she had learned in our kitchen or in a ballroom. The difference is that the ballroom taught people besides me. The kitchen would have taught us both privately and perhaps spared us a headline on a platform I do not use. As for me, I still drive the 2003 F-250. It still idles like a contented bear. The 1967 Camaro is closer to finished than it has ever been. The first time I turned the key after the rebuild and the engine caught, the sound rose through the room like a choir tuning. I thought about my father. I thought about how he wanted me to love different things. I thought about how Raven looked at me when she heard it. It sounds like the truth, she said. I agreed. Sometimes the truth is a sound before it is a sentence. People at the club still play tennis in perfect outfits, still sip wine on the terrace under soft weather, still talk about investments and art collections. Some of them have started talking about work with a different vocabulary. There is a plaque in the lobby now for the Greenville Pines Foundation Vocational Fellows. It lists names of graduates in welding, diesel mechanics, HVAC, electrical, and carpentry who received scholarships that year. If my father's ghost ever walks through that lobby at night, I hope he stops at that plaque and thinks about what legacy really means. One more thing about the ring. A month after Evan repurposed it for the scholarship auction and the pendant for the high school shop, I saw a young woman wearing the pendant at a Saturday market downtown. She was pushing a stroller and talking to her mother about night classes. The sun caught the stones like a wink. I did not say anything. I nodded to myself and bought a lemonade from the stand next to her. The day had that easy light you get at the end of spring, when heat is a promise, not a threat. This is not a story with a moral at the end. I am not interested in the comfort that comes from labeling a person villain or saint. It is a story about pressure testing. When people are suddenly handed a room they imagine is above them, some look down at the person standing beside them to measure whether that person still fits their vision. Brianna did that. Raven is not. One pulled at me. The other meets me where I am. I still rarely go to the club. When I do, it is for family or charity. I walk through the lobby in jeans and boots that have seen better days. The staff nods, not because of who my father was, but because they saw what happened when someone decided my work was embarrassing and said it out loud. Some of the members do not know who I am and treat me like a vendor. That is fine. Sometimes truth travels by first names only. The last time I saw Brianna in person was at a grocery store a few towns over. She was by the fruit, picking up peaches one by one like she was judging character. She saw me and put the peach back like it burned. She opened her mouth and closed it again. She moved her cart in a wide circle around me. We did not speak. I did not wish her harm. I wish her clarity. If she finds it, I hope it sticks. Celeste says I should consider sitting on one of the club subcommittees for the foundation. It would mean more meetings than I like and more proximity to people who care about napkin fold than makes sense to me. But it would also mean putting money and attention where it counts for the next kid who thinks greatness lives in a torque wrench. I told her I would think about it. She said that was all she ever wanted me to do. Think about it. If you were wondering whether the embarrassment ever caught up to me, the kind Brianna predicted, I will tell you this. The only time I felt embarrassed during all of this was standing at my own kitchen sink, realizing I had tolerated a small unkindness every time she wrinkled her nose at my hands after work. That is on me. I let that go on because I wanted the person I loved to be kinder than she was, and wanting does not change a person's posture. But I learned. I am learning still. There's a certain satisfaction to karma when it arrives dressed for the occasion, I suppose. Raven says it better. Karma does not always come quickly, but when it does not knock. It lets itself in. The night at the gate was not triumph. It was a hinge. Things swung open and closed. I stepped through and kept walking. That is it. No epilogue carved in marble. No final advice offered from on high. Just a man in coveralls who also owns a piece of a club he rarely uses, who learned that the difference between status and substance shows up quickest during introductions. If it has to be a test, let it be this one. When you say this is my person, do you still see them clearly when the room begins to whisper? I know my answer now. I will keep it. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.